CM, and has helped us really move forward in formulating policy debates. So let me at the outset welcome our CEO and JSOIA1, Shri Abbagani Ramu, who will be giving the inaugural remark. Director OIA1, Shri Piyush Gupta, all the colleagues from MEA and friends who have joined, our esteemed panel, the moderator, Professor Irudaya Rajan, Professor Ray from Hamad bin Khalifa University, Qatar, Lara White from IOM, Sita Sharma, everyone knows her from ILO, and Mr. Amit Saxena, who's MD Amway International. So a few housekeeping rules, even though most of us have now become quite familiar with using this virtual discussion format, is that I'll request everyone apart from the speakers to keep their microphones muted and videos turned off so that we have better connectivity. The speakers may keep their videos turned on and mics muted when the other one is speaking. Towards the end, we have some time allotted for Q&A, and additionally, you may also use the chat option to air your views and comments and suggestions, which shall be visible to all the panelists. And the moderator will also give you a chance to come and pose your comments and suggestions in the Q&A session. So with that few remarks, let me not hold you back. I'll welcome our CEO to make his inaugural remarks. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone, particularly the moderator and panelists and the participants. Before making my opening remarks, let me welcome and introduce the moderator, Professor S. Irudaya Rajan, Professor Rajay Jureidini from Ahmad Khalifa University, Qatar, Ms. Lara White from International Organization of Migration, Ms. Sita Sharma from International Labour Organization, and Mr. Amit Saxena, Managing Director, Amway International. So it is a very important and sensitive topic which ICM chose today, the recruitment cost and international migration in context of COVID-19. I said important because I need not to elaborate about the importance, because that is the major issue faced by the migrants faced. So that is why it is important. But I said it is also sensitive and delicate because there are interests of various sections of this whole process of migration needs to be addressed in a balanced way. That's why I mentioned it's sensitive and delicate. But before going to the detail of what I mentioned, let me generally give the background of this topic. So it is as we chose this topic, I think it is important in the sense that it has a major implications in terms of ethical and fair recruitment process and ensuring the welfare of migrants. It is also important because it is a place, important area in migration policy made by the governments. So that's why it is important. But at the same time, the process includes various sections, various elements, and particularly we are talking about the blue collar workers, so semi-skilled and low skilled workers who need this, who need to face this cost of recruitment. That is not much the case in case of white collar jobs, and they do not face difficulty. So it is a kind of additional cost to the people who cannot bear that cost. So that's why we need to see that how to address this issue very gently and subtly, without affecting anyone, but at the same time looking at the migration welfare of the migrants. So generally the costs involved in the recruitment cost is the cost, the kind of a jobs resource sourcing and migration related processes that is generally incurred by RA on behalf of the employee. And of course, there are various costs like medical examination before visa and visa fee itself, and when they land in a destination country, the initial stay. So these are supposed to be ideally to be borne by the employer, but in practice, this doesn't happen. So that is mostly passed on to the employees, who has to bear this cost. So to address this issue, government has taken various measures, particularly to protect the welfare of migrants. Government of India has kept a cap of 30,000 rupees, so which is about in terms of dollar, about 500 US dollar, 500 to 400 to 500 US dollar, and over and above this cost. So RAs, recruitment agents are not allowed to charge, and whatever the additional cost has to be borne by the employer. So this is a way there is some kind of a regulation, and of course the employers are prohibited additional cost incurred in the process. So to implement this process, we have a various mechanisms like overall control by Protector General of. At the same time, we have 13 different protector of immigrants who try to ensure that there is no exploitation by high charges charged by various various elements in this process to the migrants. So the high cost of migration has various implications because migrants has to incur that cost by taking a loan from someone at a higher interest rate, and of course so they also face exploitation by the employer in terms of extended working hours and reduction from the salary. So this will impact the migrant worker. So to address this issue is I think a topic for today's discussion. But some measures could be to reduce the remittance cost, recruitment cost, and improve the ethical recruitment. So there could be some ideas which we have, but most of the ideas can come for today's discussion. It could be zero fee policy, and increasing the role of government and making the employer liable for any kind of violation, and of course at the same time the self-regulation of various elements involved in this process. So solution, as I said in the beginning, needs to be a very balancing and at the same time it's not unacceptable to the recruitment agents and also employer. So this is the overall picture which we are trying to discuss and uh, elaborate today. And to just mention that the COVID situation has created a new circumstances for us, all of us, and to meet this new situation, government has taken some measures to reduce the burden on the recruitment agents by way of reducing their bank guarantee to 50% and also extending their license period for further period. So hopefully these measures will also percolate down to the migrants and they will get some benefit. So with these few words, I am really looking forward to the various ideas to be discussed today and hope those ideas will also generate result in better policy and finally translate to the benefit of migrants. So with these words, I again welcome everyone for this discussion. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. I'll just now welcome our moderator, who will then take over the proceedings. Professor Irudhya Rajan is a professor at the Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. He is very well known among the migration policy circles. He has over 35 years of research experience, has written extensively on migration issues, and has served with consultancies with various international organizations as well. He's the editor of the India Migration Report and the International Journal of Migration and Development. So over to you, sir, to carry forward the proceedings.
Thank you, Srabi. Srabi, can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Okay. Thank you, Srabi, and also ICM for inviting me to be the moderating this particular session. In fact, normally I only speak. I never moderate any session because I am more interested in as a panel speaker. When Surabhi sent me this mail and asked me, I basically said yes because of only one reason. Because I go back, my memory goes back to almost 22 years back. When we started our first Kerala Migrant Survey in 1998, we have canvassed the question on cost of migration in 1998 Kerala Migration Survey. And we reported the cost of migration was there even in 1998. Of course, it goes back earlier. What we did was we asked both the household with immigrants and returned migrant and asked them what is the cost of migration. We also asked them to give us some type of detail. Because when you ask many migrants, many times they'll say how much you spend to go, they'll say 80,000, 100,000. If you ask them for breakup, many of them will not be able to give. I given somebody 80, that's all. So we are not able to tell exactly how much the agents are taking, because otherwise we are just blaming the agent sometimes because, oh, they are taking 80,000. What are the, the costs? Suppose you go to hospital, there are different costs, medical costs, doctor consultancy, test, room rent, nursing, like that. You should have some type of a breakup. So we did in 1998 and we did a breakup of what is called 4 important costs. I just want to tell you it was in 1998. And it was 44,000 rupees is an average cost of migration to go from Kerala to any part of Gulf in 1998 for the current migrants. And we made them 4 important categories. One is called tickets, very important. Sometimes who pays the ticket, nobody knows. Is the employer is paying or who is paying tickets? Then there is a visa cost. That means today, I think everybody will talk about visa is being sold in the Gulf. Even visa was sold even 1998, 22 years back. So visa cost, the agent will tell, look, visa cost is 25,000, whatever it is. And then the agent comes in even in 1998 was only 10,000 rupees. An average agent who has an office, they were receiving only 10,000. But cheating was 15,000. In fact, the cheating was more than the what is called the commission of the agent. That means the cheating is still there. That means there are a lot of people working on sending people. So we have to distinguish between the good recruitment agents, unregistered. But I was telling to, several years back to probably Mr. Mohandas or Mr. Dr. Didar Singh, I was telling in Kerala, all returned migrants are in a way agent. So we have 15 lakh returned migrants, so we have 15 lakh agents. So this is the strategy in 1998. And the returned migrants, we asked them how much you spent. They said they spent 38,000 rupees even in 98. That means they were gone prior to our survey. And the difference is everything was increased. What is called the commission was increased by 2,000 rupees. Airfare was increased by 3,000 rupees. And the visa cost increased by 2,000 rupees. But the cheating was constant throughout the period. That means cheating is, I don't know how much cheating, I will listen from my speakers. So this is something was happened. And we are repeating the survey. So the migration cost was talked by us something like 22 years back. And we published a first paper talking about this. In 2001, in the IOM journal called International Migration, we have published a paper. There is a section on cost of migration. Of course, cost of migration was not a topic at the time. Only migrant remittances. Nobody talks about the cost. Nobody was even talking about that. And the second point which I want to make before I give it to my all my speakers. Second point, when the UN prepared the Human Development Report in 2009 on Human Development Report on barriers, the lady who was preparing the report, I have seen her in Delhi, Dr. Jenny Gluckman, she came to Delhi for a big consultancy in 2008. And then I was invited, I was sitting with them. Then I was telling them that we have a survey on cost of migration. She was asking, people collect cost of migration? And we given the special tabulation for the 2019 Human Development Report based on the 2008 Kerala Migration Survey. I think, so that's why I thought I should basically talk, because we were looking at it, we are looking at it even today. Currently, we are undertaking a survey of people who were brought by the Vande Bharat flight. There are 300,000 people already have come to Kerala. And my prediction is we'll get 500,000 by December. But I talked to some of them. And one of the person told me was, I could not even make the money what I paid to the agent. I think this is the very typical, the other side of the story. So we don't know. I want to hear from my 4 speakers. I am going to give them everybody between 8 to 10 minutes because we want to have some more questions. So I thought we'll think of 40 minutes for all of us. So I will not disturb you anyone. 8, when you cross 10, maybe I will just come in. Otherwise, I will just leave you to flow. You have 10 minutes, whatever you would like to speak on, whatever topic you are familiar with, but something to be added to the value for the policymaker. Especially, we are doing this for the ICM. And of course, ICM is part of the MEA, and they can decide several policies on recruitment costs. So I thought I am going to leave to all my speakers. So I'm going to introduce them maybe a second, then we will go by the order what is with me. I'm going to ask one of my very good friend who even visited my office sitting in front of me in Trivandrum, Professor Ray. And, he's in the Gulf. So I have seen him even in the Gulf. And in fact, we had a dinner together a long time back. He given me a special dinner. I don't know it is whose cost of it is American cost. I don't know. He has given me a good dinner. So I am going to ask him to speak for 10 minutes on recruitment cost. Now to Professor Ray.
Okay, thank you very much, Rajan. It's very nice to see you again. It's been a long time. There's nothing that I can say that you don't already know. And what you found back in 1998, very little, if anything, has changed, which is what I'm going to talk about. I'm just going to share a PowerPoint now with you. Okay, are you able, first of all, can you hear me, and are you able to see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see the PowerPoint. You can go ahead, please.
Okay, great. So I have to go quickly because I have limited time. What I'm going to, sorry, I have to manage this now. I'm going to talk about basically the system of recruitment to the GCC countries, but also it's elsewhere, as I see it and as my research has taken me to it. And then I'll be making at the end a brief comment about the effects of the COVID-19 as requested. So the system is, as others have already mentioned, is a worker pays labour recruitment system to the GCC countries. And we're going to see what that means. Well, what I want to say and show you is that the labour demand, or the demand for labour, actually begins with project tendering in countries of destination. There's a project to be done, whether it's building a house, building a building, a hotel, or road construction, a metro, whatever it might be. Whoever's doing that wants that project done and is going to finance it, calls for bids from corporations, whether local or international, to put in a tender for the project. These tendering processes go in two phases. The first is a technical evaluation, which just assesses if the company is technically capable of doing and completing the project. And the second phase is the commercial evaluation, which is about the costing. And we sometimes, there are differences of opinion as to whether in various countries and projects that there is a policy of accepting the lowest price that is tendered for a project. There are differences of policies in this. Some say that they go for the lowest price. Others say they never take the lowest price or the highest price. They take something in between, and so on. But what they also do is that they negotiate the best price. Even once they have offered, let's say, the lowest price tender, they will squeeze the company to make their price or their budget even lower. And what that does in turn is it squeezes the subcontractors that are going to be associated with that project for their contributions and to reduce their prices and costs. Now, so this is a very competitive situation. And this competitive situation requires companies to see when they're tendering where they can minimize their costs to reduce their budget in order to make their price much more competitive and much more likely that they're going to win the contract. One of the ways in which they will do that is to eliminate the migrant labour recruitment costs. So if they don't have to pay the costs of recruitment, they can keep their budget lower, right? That's the way they minimise their budget, but it's one way in which they can do that. And so it has transpired that this has pretty much been the norm for decades, right? So in the tendering process, the actual labour costs or projected labour costs, including recruitment costs, is non-transparent. In other words, that is not separated and it's not built into let's say, as a separate file in the tendering process. We are calling for that. And so then, along with this process is the competition between recruitment agencies in countries of origin in order to get the contracts to supply the labour for that project, right? And that's where the worker pays model comes in. And what I want to now reveal to you is the hidden costs, which I think is a euphemism. We need to reveal we don't want these costs hidden any longer. So I'm going to give you a table now, and I hope this is the main sort of thing that I wanted to show you. This table looks at the recruitment costs. The first two columns here are taken from the Philip Martin's book, which is basically the results of the World Bank ILO NOMAD study on recruitment costs, or the cost of migration, which the idea of migration I disagree with, and I disagree with a number of things, but this is very, very instructive. And to show you, these are the breakdowns that Rajan has already made some mention of. These are from interviews with Indians returning to India from Qatar, and with workers returning to Pakistan, going from Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Now, and then the third column is from a study that I have done, where it wasn't getting the information from the workers themselves. And Rajan, I really agree with you there. Workers don't really know exactly what it's for. So how they got this information and how reliable it is, although it looks reasonably reliable in terms of the overall costs and the comparative costs. And I got these figures from employers who were actually paying recruitment costs and from recruitment agencies who manage all of this process, right? And that's for Bangladeshis. So what I wanted to highlight here, well, a number of things. First, you can see that the amount paid by the Indians is significantly lower than the amounts paid by Pakistanis and by Bangladeshis. And Martin's explanation is that the Indian government's interventions and regulations and policing compliance with the rules and so on in India largely accounts for the lower recruitment charges to workers. But have a look here, where the researchers in the NOMAD study accepted the idea that the visa for Pakistanis cost $2,859, which is a bit strange, right? And it's a huge amount. And clearly, that's not what the visa costs. If you look over here for Qatar, and I think this is pretty much standard throughout the GCC countries, maybe there are some exceptions, one or two, but it's around $82 for the visa. And the visa is actually paid for by the employer before it can actually be issued, right? So there's a problem here that we need to reveal, that if agents or anybody else is saying the cost to you of the visa is this amount of money, it's basically a lie. Right, that's not the cost of the visa. This is the cost of the visa, $82. And yet, this is the total amount that I calculated for the Bangladeshis in Qatar, the recruitment costs, but they are paying actually $3,300 on average, right? So what we see in all of the literature, all the studies where there are variations between them, they're relatively minor variations, but you see that the Pakistanis and Bangladeshis are paying really huge amounts.
Professor Ray, 2 more minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
So the cost, the difference between the actual cost, which is $1,296, and the $3,300 is about $2,000, right? So where does that $2,000 go? How is that distributed? What does the employer actually pay for, if anything? Maybe they pay for the airfare, which means that this figure, the difference, is going to be even higher. So where does this money go? What should the employer pay for? What should the employee pay for, if anything? In the Supreme Committee for Delivery and Legacy in Qatar, this is the Supreme Committee that is managing the World Cup for 2022. All of the companies that work for the Supreme Committee have been approached, and they've been asked, can you provide evidence that you pay recruitment costs of the migrant workers that you brought in? If there is no evidence of payment, the employing company has to reimburse the workers for what they paid, right? So that's something that's been going on for some time now. So the major hidden cost, and I don't like to talk about hidden costs, I like to reveal the hidden cost and talk about the hidden cost openly, is this kickback, bribery, or exaction, however you want to term it. It's the recruitment agent giving money to the personnel of the employer for the labour supply contract, and anything up to $1,500 per worker is paid. And I have seen offers by an agent for Bangladeshi workers offering $1,500. Oops. Right. So they're presented as recruitment fees or visa fees, which are, misleading statements. So the worker pays model is a labour market distortion. It's based not just on qualifications and experience, but also on the ability of workers to pay and willingness to pay the money and go into debt, as has been mentioned already. It allows deception in wage levels and substitute contracts because they're bound by the loans, by the money they have paid up front. Though substitute contracts are disappearing with the development of visa offices in countries of origin. It feeds this corruption, the kickback, bribery, and with the kafala control. I'm nearly finished.
Yeah, you should speed up a little bit. Yeah. Sorry? You should speed up. You already completed 12 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so this leads to debt bondage, indebtedness, forced labour, and so on. And so there are prohibitions against charging workers. Half of the Gulf states have laws against charging workers, the ILO convention. And I won't go into this. I don't have time, but I can just leave this up there for you. The economic downturn is going to mean increased competition, less demand for labour, and a continuation of the worker pays model, in my view, unless something is done about it, and increased risk of continuing corrupt practices.
Thank you, Professor Ray. I think I should have given you 30 minutes, but then we have 3 more speakers. Yeah, thank you very much for your thing. We will pick up some questions at later stages. I'm not going to do anything with your presentation. No, I'm going to invite Lara White, a senior specialist with IOM. It is your time, madam. Lara White, yeah. Ray, you can quit your PowerPoint.
Yes, I have. It should have gone. Yeah. Is it gone?
It has not gone. It has not gone.
Oh.
Yes, it has gone now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It took
Lara White, yes. Yes. We are not able to hear you, Laura.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, please. Please go
Sorry,
ahead. Yeah.
I had an additional mute on. Thanks very much
Okay.
for this kind introduction, and also thank you to Ray for laying this important and very specific groundwork in terms of the in terms of framing recruitment fees and costs and the business model of recruitment, and indeed that linkage with procurement, which is critical in terms of unpacking how we can we can collectively work to operationalize ethical recruitment principles. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Just wanted to start again by reaffirming this commitment to ethical recruitment and also to a reformed business model. This is a quote that is coming from the Leadership Group for Responsible Recruitment, which is a collective of leadership companies that are indeed trying to change the way that within their supply chains that workers are recruited. And so it begins really with a fundamental principle that no worker should pay for a job, and that the costs of recruitment should not be borne by the worker, but by the employer. And this commitment at a corporate level, I think Ray is and other guests is very critical in terms of reshaping these procurement models. So we can go to the next slide. So I thought I would just highlight here, and again, much of my presentation will be regionally focused, but looking at what we've called labor or human resources supply chains, understanding that as well as having most companies in the production of goods and services have supply chains, but they additionally have labor supply chains, which is basically that chain of brokers or individuals who are involved in the recruitment of workers. And so I just thought I'd put up this slide very quickly just to underscore the complexity of what we're talking about, because sometimes I think there's an assumption that there's an employer and a recruiter and then the worker. But in fact, from our research, what we've seen is actually these chains are far more complex than that, and they can involve they're also quite obscure in that the employer may not be aware of all the links in the chain, particularly when subagents are involved. And additionally, the worker may not be specifically aware of all of the various intermediaries who are involved in this process of recruitment and placement of workers. So if we can go to the next slide. Ray had mentioned in terms of recruitment fees and costs, in noting the very important work of Dr. Martin and the Nomad Initiative. Through our own what we call labor supply chain mapping, which is again looking at taking corporate examples and looking at how workers are discovering opportunities for work at the community level and tracing that entire migration process to the workplace. What we have seen is very much situations of excessive recruitment fees. So I think that what's important here, and I'll just leave this slide up. I won't go into great detail in terms of how it was derived, but that the important point here is that workers are very likely to pay these kinds of fees in the absence of due diligence from the supplier or employer over the recruitment agency or over the entire process, and taking that holistic approach. And some of the risks that we have noted are certainly in trends would be indebtedness, that workers incur significant recruitment debt, which is often well in excess of the limitations, the regulatory limitations of countries of origin or destination. And this can include loans at excessive interest rates, and also contributing to workers being unable to leave their jobs because of this, because of debt. Discrimination, so whether it's gender-based, age-based, ethnic and ethnicity-based discrimination. It can lead, we've had findings of limited ability to terminate contracts early, even in the cases of demonstrated exploitation. Deceptive recruitment practices, where promises of earnings were inflated, or the job description was incorrect, leading workers to be trapped in a situation where the job that they thought that they were entering is not in fact what they are receiving. And then really importantly, limited access to remedy. So so often, particularly when this can sometimes lead to situations of either irregularity or where workers are in a situation of debt bondage, they have limited access to grievance mechanisms because often for fear of deportation and of premature employment contract cessation. So one of the key lessons of the labor supply chain mappings that we've conducted is that although the legal ceilings on what can be charged to migrants exist in many countries of origin or countries of destination, they're often not adhered to. And in this case, the workers are charged excessive fees. So I'm now going to go into, if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to focus the next couple of slides on different approaches to, again, reform of this prevailing business model of a worker pay system to an employer pay system. One is looking at the issue of regulation. So IOM convened a global conference on the regulation of international recruitment, which was held in Montreal in June of 2019. 100 participants attended with representing over 30 countries, included policymakers and regulators and practitioners from ministries of labor, foreign affairs, immigration, and including labor attaches and inspectors. And it was important to convene this group simply because there is no one standard approach to the regulation of recruitment agencies. And so at the request of our member states, we convened this meeting to basically explore the various approaches to regulation and to come up with global recommendations. And so the conference proposed a set of 55 recommendations that are very much aligned with the ILO general principles and operational guidelines for fair recruitment and across 8 policy areas. And it also outlined next steps and in terms of what better could look like across regulation. And it should be noted also that the recommendations are such. They are recommendations, they're not binding. But they provide really useful suggestions to governments in terms of how to guide their regulatory and program design, understanding that there are, again, multiple approaches to regulation. And next slide. So in terms of how the recommendations can be used, we can use them for policy advocacy and dialogue, and they also provide a comprehensive framework to really provide a holistic approach to regulatory design and also enforcement. And they offer a set of off-the-shelf principles for each area of intervention with the aim of building a public and private consensus. And so, again, those 8 areas we're looking at the protection of migrant workers through regulation. We're looking at recruitment fees, registration and licensing, administration, inspections, and enforcement, looking at ratings and rewards and rankings and other incentivization mechanisms, and then, of course, access to grievance mechanisms and dispute resolution and bilateral, regional, and multilateral frameworks, as well as migrant welfare and assistance. So my colleague will be hopefully posting the links to these documents and reference tools in the chat function. Next slide. So I also wanted to highlight some of the other work that IOM is involved in terms of, again, promoting this kind of a holistic approach to a reform of the recruitment industry. One would be through our CREST initiative, which is a regional partnership initiative that aims to realize the potential of business to uphold human and labor rights of migrant workers in their operations and supply chains. And so this initiative really, again, takes a holistic approach, but from a business perspective, working with brands, working with employers, and then again, working with recruiters in order to try and ensure that these entities have good management systems that then support the adherence to both ethical recruitment and decent work. And I'll probably stop there on that slide. Go to the next one, please. And again, just to confirm that we're working with all actors in these kind of labor supply chains. wanting to enhance transparency in the supply chains and address risks of identify risks and then address them of exploitation and modern slavery in overall business operations. We want to build the capacity of employers and recruiters to implement international standards in their own business practices, and then again, increase access to transparent information on employment terms and conditions, ethical recruitment services, and effective grievance mechanisms.
Lara, 2 more
Yep.
minutes.
I think I have 2 more slides, so that's perfect. Okay, the next the next slide would be looking at our IRIS initiative, and this is the International Recruitment Integrity System. It's a specific initiative that is really targeting the capacity building of recruiters. So how do recruiters? So while the ILO guidelines are really useful in terms of setting up that that milestone of what and defining what is fair recruitment. The IRIS standard, which was created through a multi-stakeholder partnership, then basically more clearly defines what, how recruiters can implement or can show adherence, demonstrate adherence and compliance with international standards in their business practices. And so much of our work is focused on again, working with recruitment agencies to improve those management systems, and then additionally advocating very strongly for the rights of workers and advancing this employer pays principle. Next slide. So finally, I just wanted to add I actually have 2 more slides quickly. One is just to highlight that we have 2 guides for business in relation to COVID-19. These were released very quickly at the strong request of our business partners within Asia and the Pacific, primarily, but also globally. One is for employers looking at how they can provide ensure their duty of care in terms of protecting migrant workers within the context of COVID-19. And the second is for labor recruiters, understanding that they both play a role in terms of protecting migrant workers, and particularly in the situation of this current crisis. And again, my colleague will be posting those links in the chat function. And then finally, last slide. Is looking at challenges for recruitment agencies, because I think it's important to understand that in the context of this pandemic, that recruitment agencies themselves are also facing enormous challenges, just in terms of one thing in ensuring the continuity of their business, but also at ensuring that migrant workers under their care are protected, particularly in a very unknown environment where it's not even clear at this stage what kinds of mechanisms will be put into place in terms of points of entry requirements, quarantine, testing, and this leads to a really important question of who is going to bear these additional costs that are almost certainly going to result from the pandemic. And I think I'll stop here and allow for discussion. And the next presenter. Thank you.
We moved from the researcher to the IOM. Now we are going to move to Sida Sharma, lead EU-India Policy Dialogue Project on Migration Mobility, ILO Delhi. Sida, 10 minutes to start with.
Thanks so much, Dr. Rajan, and thanks Surabhi, ICM, and of course MEA, JS Ramu, and Mr. Piyush, and everyone else here, and my panelists. It's great to actually come after Ray and Lara. Ray, because of the reality of what's happening at the destination end, and also for Lara for laying out what the how the system really is in some ways. So thanks to both my panelists, and I know Amit is coming after me and he'll do all the practical stuff, so I'm just in between. But just before I proceed, I just taking a cue from some of what Dr. Rajan was saying in the beginning, where he was talking about looking at costs and the breakup and understanding recruitment fees and costs. I'm actually going to share with you a little bit of what the ILO has been doing on this. For some of you, and I guess for all of you here, you may know that the ILO is a standard setting organization. And so a couple of years ago, we were tasked by our constituents to actually try and define recruitment costs and fees, and to break this down and to really try and understand what happens in this migration story of costs. And you will find, and we will share on the chat, actually, I'll share that with you in a bit. But last year in November of 2019, the ILO did actually come up with guiding principles and operational guidelines for fair recruitment, which Lara also mentioned in her, conversation. And these are non-binding principles, but they are actually guidelines that help policymakers and other stakeholders, also employers, to really understand how they can work towards a more fair process of recruitment. They include interventions for policy and tools and give ideas for that. But what I'm going to focus on that, and there's one part of these guidelines which actually help to define recruitment costs and recruitment fees. And I'm going to actually talk more about that today. But of course, before I begin, I'm going to lay out the general principle, exactly what Lara laid out in the beginning, which is that, workers are not to be charged. We have to work towards an employer pay model. And however difficult that seems, considering we started with Ray and the reality of that, I think the ideal world, we want to go towards that and look at a way where workers are not having to pay for for the recruitment. I mean, you and I don't pay for recruitment. There's no reason why they should. Okay, so just to share, from the recruitment guidelines that we have, and to understand recruitment fees and costs, there are basically, it covers 3 elements, and it's been divided up. So recruitment has actually been broken down. There is an understanding on recruitment fees, which basically talks of any kind of payment that may be made through the recruitment process, either to a recruiter or to an employer, or anyone who's a third party in between an employer and worker. But also if there is any way that the money is taken back from the worker at a later stage. So any of these is part of the recruitment fees. But they may be one time, or they may be recurring. There may be, it may also include costs like advertising and interview costs and all of those costs. But these are the fees, and these are recruitment fees, and we recognize them. When it comes to actually looking at the related costs, and these are integral to the recruitment process. I mean, there are many recruiters with us here today. And we know that for placing people, there are a number of costs. And some of them have been very much defined in these guidelines. And there's a list of 7 costs. And these include insurance, medical, training costs, skills, testing costs, also costs for transport, lodging, any equipment like tools that the worker might need, and also admin costs. And these are actually related costs, so that means that they will be incurred. But what is interesting in these guidelines is that they says that there is a level of flexibility to determine the exceptions to their applicability, which means that the governments and the workers and employers must come together, and at the national level there must be legislation that tries to define these and defines who pays for these, because it's not we're not going from day one to day next and happily the employer is going to pay, because that's not happening. But how could we incrementally move forward in this direction? And then there are exceptions that could be made, in the sense that there could be times when the employer is when the worker is actually paying for some of these costs. But these exceptions are to be considered only under certain circumstances and subject to labor standards, and not just at any time and all the time. And these exceptions must be in the interest of workers. They must be limited also. They must not be for all workers in all categories and at all times. And they must also be disclosed actually to the workers. The workers must be aware of these before even they come in for the job, right? They must know that there are these costs. The third element, which has been defined, is of course illegitimate costs and costs which are undisclosed. And these include, when I first came into this world and I started talking to recruiters, I was quite taken aback at the kind of costs that they incurred to entertain some of the HR managers and recruiters that were coming from destination. It came as quite a surprise to me at one level, just because of the kind of costs that were involved. And this included, looking after their families, taking them shopping. I was like, what's that got to do with the recruitment of the worker? So those are all actually the illegitimate costs and the costs that really should not feature in the recruitment process. And they, obviously account for bribes, extortions, things like that. And they obviously must not be charged to the worker. All of this, of course, will sound to some of my friends sitting on the recruitment side like, but this is business and this is how some of it has been happening for a very long time. But the truth is, yes, that it does happen, but it does need to also move away from some of that. And that is why these guidelines and principles have actually been, been accepted by and come through. And we have a number of countries who have obviously started adapting them to their national legislation. And I would also urge the government of India to actually look at them to consider how the Indian government can move forward into adapting some of these principles into the work that they are looking at as well in terms of revising the laws. Just to close really some of this, I think, while these standards and these guidelines have been laid out, and there are the definitions of costs which actually help us to break it down and therefore move towards policy making, I think there are some advantages that we must use, which is the leveraging of technology, for example. Technology is going to help us in the future to try and monitor some of these costs and to find ways of how, people can also report back. There are also tools where workers are reporting back, and that helps. There's been some work that we've done in Sri Lanka, for example, where there is, when the recruiters that are not charging are actually highlighting the employer pay models and are highlighting employers that are not charging, as well as there's niche representation for these RAs as well, which means that they are actually getting better publicity for not charging workers. However, few times that this might happen, and I know it doesn't happen very often, I think the promotion of having employer pay models or employers who pay or recruiters when they're not charging is absolutely critical, because it helps to bring momentum to good recruiters and gives them, space and highlights some of the good work that they are doing. So I would actually perhaps stop with some of that. I will share the guidelines so that they're available to everyone and everybody can go through them, and leave it now to Amit, who's, I think, the next speaker. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Sida. I think you are on time. That's good for us. So we'll have some question on all the presentation. Now we are moving to the welcome Amit anyway. So we are going to move to the person who is basically experienced with recruitment. I think we are coming to the, where we are all talking because we are a researcher on recruitment. I think he's doing it. So let us listen to Amit for 10 minutes. Amit, it's your time. Starts now. We are not able to hear you. Please unmute.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Surbhi of ICM, and thank you, MEA, for providing this wonderful platform. So I'm happy that I'm the last one speaking because, I have to rebut a lot of the things that have been said about the industry and the way we work. And, we're in a little bit of a corner, I think, in this debate. But I'm thankful for the openness that this platform brings because, it's important. It's in our favor as well to talk about some of these issues. The first point is I represent an industry that recruits a few million people to various parts of the work per year. We operate under licenses issued by the Ministry of External Affairs. And, if you look at the registered data on the eMigrate system over the last 4 or 5 years, you'll find that the complaints against these licensed recruiters is actually in thousands, right? It's less than 0.1% of the number of people that we recruit. Right, so that's the first point I would like to put out there. In any quality system, even for a manufacturing industry, 0.1% defect doesn't mean much. Right, so that's the first thing I would like everyone here to please recognize. I say this with all humility. Right, The second is in terms of some of the costs listed over here. I saw, I think Dr. Ray's presentation, which says that the India is the lowest, right? It's an average of $1,100, which honestly I find quite high, right? Most of us, will tell you that 20 to 30% of our business is actually employer paid, right? That's the first thing people should note. The second is that most of the recruitment, especially in more mature industries like oil and gas, for example, the costs paid by the immigrants are much lower than some of the costs that were presented. This is where I'll dispute what was said. I think it was said that Dr. Martin has said that this is probably due to higher compliance in India. I beg to differ. If you ask any businessman in India, he'll tell you that compliance actually increases the costs of operation. It never helps you in reducing the costs of operation. Right. I would say this is primarily because the economy grew and because workers and migrants had access to better opportunities. Right. Because of which they could choose the kind of terms that they wanted to be recruited at. That's just, I wanted to put something out before I start. Now, quickly on the topic itself, in terms of costs of the recruitment costs. One is we have to make a difference between the cost of migration and the recruitment fee. Right, the recruitment fees somehow I find in this whole conversation is being attributed to the recruitment agency, right, in terms of their operations cost and in terms of their profit. But the cost of migration, right, which is completely different from the recruitment fee, right? It includes, as some of the presentations have shown, the medical tests, the insurance, the airfares, right? It's actually missing a lot of things in there, right? The visa stamping that's done by most of the sponsoring countries. Qatar has started visa stamping. Abu Dhabi started visa stamping. All these costs are 6,000 to 10,000 rupees. Right, which were not there when the entire cap on recruitment fees was created. Gamka Medical, which used to be 1,200 rupees, is now at 4,800 rupees. Right, skill testing are all things that have come recently. What about the cost of business? What about the cost of compliance? Right, all these are costs which are eventually borne by the agency, which are passed on. So in India, even today, we pay a GST of 18%. Right, please, I would like all policymakers and all the academia here to note that 18% of what you call the recruitment cost actually goes into the coffers of the government. So in India, we are effectively charging job seekers for their recruitment. We're charging job seekers for finding a job, right? No one seems to talk about this. This is 18% of cost, which is loaded on the entire cost, right? Which is actually going to the government. It is not going into the pockets of the recruitment agencies, right? There is costs of significant costs of risks and liabilities, which are often swept under the carpet. Right? What happens if an employer has spent 3,000 dirhams in terms of dollars? Because I see we have a lot of people from the West, would be around $800 to $1,000. So the employer spent $1,000 on the cost of visa sponsorship, and the immigrant decides that he doesn't want to travel. Right? Who actually then pays these costs? It's very simple to say that this is entirely employer paid, but in a business context, very difficult to change, right? And really, if you want to reform the system, you need to have an immigrants charter, right? It can't just be the employers, it can't just be the recruitment agents who have to reform themselves. We talk about reform, but we talk about reform very, very selectively. There has to be an immigrants charter where the responsibilities of the immigrant are also defined. If they're refusing to accept a job offer after their visa comes, who pays for that, right? My last point, quickly is, we have talked about protection, we have talked about reforms. I hear the word control all the time. This is very 1980s to me in terms of policy making, to be honest, right? Over the last few years, I've heard the government talking about ease of business. I've talked about ranking of companies. I've talked about promotion. I've heard about the government's working with people to promote their business. I would love if instead of the protector of immigrants, we start calling them the promoter of immigrants, right? And I'll give you a practical example of this. I am also a part of the NSDC ecosystem, the National Skills Development Company. They've chosen their words very carefully. It's a development company. It's not a protection company, right? At the start of the year, they actually sit with us and ask us, how many people will you train? How will you train them? How can we help you train them, right? They provide us with funds for training. They've given blanket GST waivers to all of us, right, as training partners as part of that ecosystem. Last year, I trained 3,000 people, out of which I sent majority of them abroad, right? That's what we did last year, right? We still talk about protection in terms of the POE and the new Immigration Act, but NSDC says we will fund you. We will give you GST waivers, right? We will subsidize the training costs. We will help you place them. If you place them, we will give you a 15% booster in terms of the fees that are charged. Now, this is policy making in the year 2020. And this is what we need to move towards if we want to make India the skills export capital of the world. That's what the government has been talking about. The NSDC has managed to recruit a few thousands. We're already recruiting a few million people per year, right? The academia is accepting that we're doing this on fairly ethical basis. Why then do we still get complaints for simple advertisements? I've had notices received from the Protectorate of Immigrants about different font sizes that I've used in my advertisements in a newspaper. Right now, this is regulation and control that holds us back. My simple submission, I have policymakers here today. I'm talking to you in confidence. I hope I'm not overstepping my mandate, but I'm requesting you all to change the mindset and help us take this industry forward. We can recruit millions more of Indians abroad. We can do them on fairly ethical terms. We can do them on higher salaries, but we need help from the government. We need you to help us promote. So on October 5th, it's NSDC has organized a meeting for me with the Indian ambassador to Russia, right? They're taking us abroad. They're helping promote us. They're not holding us back, right? With that, Dr. Rajan, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Surabhi.
Thank you, Amit. I think I am with you, Amit. I think I have 2 3 points before I hand over the time to the participants to ask some questions. I think I have 2 points. One is, I think, as I told you when in the beginning, last 20 years, the cost has not changed. The last year, we did a survey, it is 80,000. But that time it was 40,000. The dollar is changed. At the time, the dollar was only 36 rupees. So the recruitment cost is same for the last 20 years. So I think something, I think the Ray was saying, there is no change. I started up. The second point, I think something very important. I think this needs a lot of policy change, which I agree with you. We should not talk about 2020. We should talk about 2030. You should think ahead. I think we are not doing that. We are thinking back. We should look at front. I think India is greatly having what is called a demographic dividend. I think the agents are going to play a major role in pushing people outside the country. And the India government always we talk about, whenever, I was part of the migration policy several years back. We always talk about facilitating legal, orderly, and safe migration. I think this has to be changed. We should talk about. We should not do hide and seek like a biscuits. We have hide and seek biscuits. No. We should openly say that promoting legal, orderly, and safe migration. I think that should be the part of that, because demographic dividend has an expiry date, which is 2040. So you have to use these young people. I don't think India can provide employment for all the people who are coming up in the future. We have to depend upon international migration. For that, we need you. I don't think nobody honored you, Amit. I think we need you. But the thing is, it has to be some understanding has to come in. So with that, I think one more point before I speak, I think I heard from all the speakers, people have missed it. One point is that because of the recruitment cost, there is a huge undocumented migrants in the Gulf. People don't want to come. Even I was talking to somebody in Gulf. They said, I don't want to come because I didn't get my money back. I'm underground. So I think you are creating, I think what Ray started, the recruitment starts from the destination country. They are making the projects. And it comes to back here, which you are charging, it goes back. So with that, we have 20 minutes right now. I can see some of my friends and the experts like Vinod Khatri. I can see him. I see Dr. Suresh Kumar. I am going to give some time. We'll have 10 minutes for the questions, and then I'll give you each speaker 2 minutes each to answer it. So now it's open to people. You can raise your hands or you can pick up the mic. Whatever you can do, you can do. Suresh Kumar, just 2 minutes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you, ICM, for this invitation and taking the initiative for issuing the problems of the recruitment fraternity. In continuation to my friend, Mr. Amit Saxena has talked about the issues what the recruitment fraternity is facing. because exactly clear what he said, that the cost of migration and the cost of have to be separate. Migration is recruitment is entirely different. And if you see that actually Government of India is allowed the recruitment agents to charge 30,000 rupees plus GST on the service charges and collecting from the candidate. And there is three types of recruitments are happening in India. One is totally free recruitment where the clients pays everything, including the medical charges, joining ticket, visas, and every service. Candidates. And most of the where the employer doesn't pay anything, we need to collect the recruitment cost from the candidate, and plus the we need to buy the ticket charges. And as far as the recruitment cost is concerned, because basically it is mainly the advertisement cost, interview cost, trade test charges, because trade test charges for a welder is costing certain time, it is for 4,000 to 5,000 rupees. And this pre-medical charges, GAMGA charges, as Mr. Amit said, it's crossing 5,000 rupees. Now this new COVID PCR test has to be carried out, the candidate want to travel. This is again costing around 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. And the visa costing, visa stamping in India, Kuwait, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and all this cost is there. And plus the immigration charges, air tickets, insurance cost, all this is there actually. And as Mr. Rajan said that actually in 1998, the cost was 44,000 rupees. In 2020, we are only getting 30,000 rupees to be charged. If you see a doctor, any professional, any consultant, there is no norms for collecting the service charges and all. They can collect according to their professionalism. And whereas in our recruitment industry, we are restricted to charge only 30,000 rupees. Whereas the cost is increasing more and more day by day. And this ministry has to be taken care. Then only we can able to become the skilling capital of the world, recruiting the people from India, because India is the youngest country and we have a lot of manpower and a lot of opportunities are coming in from various parts of the world. And this is really has to be taken care. And one more thing.
Thank you, Suresh.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, apart this GST has to be taken care, because GST is a very big problem the recruitment fraternity is facing, and the cost it has to be exempted from the service charges when a job seeker seeking a job abroad, and definitely it should not be charged for this GST and all. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. From POE officers? Any POEs? Professor Binod Katria, do you want to say anything, Binod?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Rajan. Well, it was quite eye-opener, the presentations from both sides, from the academic side, from the policy-making side, and of course the recruitment agent side. What is missing is the migrants themselves. I had said this in one of the earlier sessions also, and I would have appreciated it very much if any migrant would have been here, either returned migrant or somebody who could have taken part through online discussion. So what is important here to ask that it is a responsibility of the recruitment agent companies also to look at the welfare of the migrants themselves. So now we are in a world of corporate social responsibility. So perhaps somebody can throw some light what these big companies are intending to or have done in terms of corporate social responsibility in this field of migration management, where they need not look at the cost, but only what they can spend if they are making profit or if they are making supernormal profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Binod. Thank you, Binod. Any other questions? Any POE? Any other persons?
Good evening, sir. This is POE Chennai. You would like to come in, please?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think we have very good recruiting agents also. We have some recruiting agents who really overcharge immigrants in the name of training, etc. There are two cases where I had to really fight with one RA and get back 1,20,000 to one immigrant and 92,000 to one immigrant in return for being wrongly charged by the RA. So what RAs generally, some RAs, not all RAs, what they do is they take money and service charge with a receipt. And for the other part, they take money through private transactions, which the government has no right to question. So when the damage is done and when we go to address the grievance, we find that the money has been taken personally in one case by the LD of one recruiting agent. Is my personal experience in Chennai. So what an MD of a company can have a transaction with the immigrant who is going to go out. So we could not question him because he says this is a personal transaction. So we have cases like this where trainings are overcharged. There are some good RAs, definitely not all RAs are like this, but we are having these cases and we are helpless when we come to address the grievances of such immigrants. The damage is already done and we have gone there, faced problem, come back, but when they return, we see that the immigrant has paid 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs, even 1,50,000, etc. to register agent. So what we are having is we are seeing that on the one side, when the illegal agencies are surviving, we have some recruiting agents who take enormous money in the name of personal transactions through the staff of their office or through their own names. We have had personal experience cases in Chennai. At least I have 3 or 4 such cases. So we are really helpless when we come to addressing such grievances. I would just like to submit this. Thanks.
Thank you, Sumati from the POFP from Chennai. I think
how to make this collection transparent. Say training fees, whatever. We agree that the RAs incur costs, but let them take the charges and show the transparency through some receipts in form of receipt to the immigrant or whatever. For the other part, no receipt is given, so we do not have any receipt to challenge their taking so much money. So we are really helpless when we come to addressing such grievances.
Thank you, Sumati. Thank you, Sumati POE from Chennai, talking about some recruitment charging more. I think we will discuss further on that. Yeah. Any other questions, clarifications? Please unmute all people who are not speaking.
Professor Rajan, this is Shabri.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be in these conversations, and thank you, Surabhi, to ICM and MEA for organizing this. You know, I'm so struck by all the things that Amit has mentioned. I think, with big thanks to Ray and Lara and Sita for, putting out the different perspectives. I'm always very curious when I listen to Amit, because what Amit does is really open up this Pandora's box. We also heard this from Sureshji. With regards to the point, I also see here from Qureshi Saab, where he says, I agree with all the points raised by Mr. Amit Saxena. Very true. Here's my question, Amit. This is, and not just a question to Amit, I think one thing that we have to be very clear now going forward is that this is not a recruitment industry versus others competition. We have very clearly recognized, and we should, I think Amit's point also there comes into perspective here, we recognize that the recruitment industry is such an integral part of the migration discourse, particularly in the South Asia, Middle East corridor. Full stop. Now, how do we move from there? So perhaps, Amit, and here's perhaps a fundamental disagreement that I've had in the points that, in one point that you make, where you talk about changing the name. We just heard Sumati ma'am from the Chennai POE talk about the issues that she has been seeing firsthand. But she's protector of immigrant. And I liked how you said this, we need to make it promoter of immigrants, right? Here's my question to you, Amit, and I have raised this difference with you previously as well, so I'll repeat it again. How do we now reconcile, given the fact that you said 20 to 30% of what you earn is from employers, but that means 60 to 70% or 70 to 80% of what you earn is on the backs of migrant workers? If that is the case, Amit, how do we reconcile between promotion and protection? Maybe you have the answer for that as well, given the fact that this is an important point that we need to go forward. I take into consideration that I really like that slide that Lara put forward, where she talks about the supply chains perspective. Let's not forget that there is a whole recruitment supply chain here, that there are sub-agents, that it starts in Bombay and it ends in that little village somewhere in Maharashtra, if at all, if that is the case. But so just looking at those supply chain elements, listening to what Sumati ma'am has said and those real issues, how do we reconcile between promotion and protection so that migrant workers are not once at the receiving end of this discussion? Like Binod sir said, it's important to keep in mind that they have their perspectives. Thanks.
Thank you, Sabari. So now we are going to ask the fourth speaker. I'm going to start with Amit because Amit ended, so I want to start with Amit. Amit, you have 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan, and thank you, Shabri, for at least recognizing what we're saying. And that's why these platforms are important, so that our point of view gets across. See, I'll accept, right? I said at the start, we recruit a few million people. We do get thousands of complaints. I don't want to gloss over that. 0.1% is still too much because these are human beings, right? We do need to address that. However, there are a lot of innovations that are possible, which we need to look at. One is the use of insurance to bring on board, like even the POE ma'am from Chennai, talked about, basically these are financing problems, right? So if we can come up with innovative financial and insurance solutions to cover some of the risks and liabilities which are posed by the emigrant, for example, dropping out, or there being something unfortunate in the emigrant's family because of which he needs to return, how do you handle those situations? Right? The government is not going to pay for it. You don't want the emigrant to pay for it. The employer is in a competitive world, doesn't want to pay for it. Who pays for it? This is a classic situation which is created it's asking for an insurance solution. And, I see a lot of very connected individuals here, policymakers here, ILO. I would encourage, if you can help us go to the IRDA and, there's this performance insurance products that are out there. There is, omissions and errors insurance products that are out there. We don't have the heft with the IRDA to get these products created. Help us create these products. Help us address some of these issues practically. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. Now, Sita.
Thank you, Dr. Rajan. And, coming back from where I had started also earlier and listening to also all the other speakers and Amit, thanks very much also for the chats, because I've been following some of them as well. There's one from Shailender that really says, can we focus on the employers and how the employers start paying if we don't want the recruiters to pay? Because the match has to happen and somebody has to be paid for the services. And I'm all for, the recruitment industry knows we've worked very closely for years, so I completely understand, and I work, closely with all of them. And I do agree we need to find solutions that do work to make the business move forward. And I think at the ILO, we are also working with destination countries to try and get employers to be paying more and to become more accountable. Qatar being a case, we also have an office there that is working closely towards those issues. But also just, there is one piece in this which, Lara showed in her diagram. And this has got to do with sub-agents. This is a reality. They are the ones who charge more of the money. You actually don't. Many of you only charge that 30,000 which you're permitted to charge. But there's a lot of layers before that might have charged money that you may not even be aware of. And I think these are some of the elements that have to be addressed. And it's not like I have any easy answers, but these are some of the issues that still need addressing. And of course, we're very open and working with the government quite a lot to try and find solutions to some of these issues, so that at the end, the migrants don't end up paying the amounts that they are. And I leave it at that. I think, we can all keep working together to find solutions. And I think we are making those efforts now. So thanks very much for that.
Thank you. Lara, please.
Yes. Okay. I would just like to start first by really underscoring what was eloquently stated by both Shabri and Amit, that it isn't all, the systems change is not is not entirely the responsibility of the recruitment agencies. We really do need to take a holistic approach here. We're talking about complex business models that require intervention at all levels. So that includes governments, and it certainly includes also the employers, but also going back to Ray's point at the beginning, going back to these procurement, it doesn't actually begin with the employers. It begins with these buying practices of goods and services, and those clients, those procurement processes have to change. And so that kind of links up again with that point of corporate social responsibility. It's interesting because some of our partners, our business corporate partners, they say that this isn't actually part of CSR. This is part of sustainability. So how is it that you can have sustainable business means eliminating human rights and labor rights violations? And so some of the corporates that we have been working with I've been in the room while they're working with their employers, their suppliers, to state, okay, so if you need to incur greater costs because you're paying the costs of recruitment, what does that mean in that cost per unit business relationship, going back to that procurement issue? It really does begin with that. And it's important that the MNEs who are committed to ethical recruitment practices actually bring their buyers into the room and include not just the sustainability teams, but also those business development teams. I wanted just to highlight this because it came up several times about GST. To me, this is a real indicator. I absolutely agree that if 18% is being charged and that is then being levied onto the worker, that needs a re-examination, and certainly I think indicates perhaps a lack of policy coherence amongst the many different kind of regulatory bodies who feed into migration management. So migration governance is not simply the jurisdiction of immigration authorities. It also intersects with ministries of health, with business and industry. So it really does take, again, a kind of a multi-sectoral approach at the national level. But on my final point, I really do want to end with this, is that, you know, we're talking about, and I really appreciate the comment regarding the voice of migrants. So it's interesting that a lot of this discussion is, of course, focused on lower skilled migrant workers. But as a migrant worker myself, I can say that as a high skilled migrant worker, nobody ever questions whether or not high skilled workers should pay the cost of migration. It is assumed that the employer will pay. And so this real disconnect, why is it that we have these relatively academic discussions about whether or not lower skilled workers should pay and how much, when in fact these are the people who can least afford to pay the costs of recruitment and migration, and nobody ever questions whether or not high skilled workers should pay. And I can say that I love my career with the International Organization for Migration. It has been very rewarding, but there is no way that I would pay 2 years of salary or half a year of salary in order to have this employment opportunity. So I'll leave it on that note.
Thank you, Lala. Professor Ray is here or he left? I don't know. Professor Ray?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Lara. I want to sort of take up where you left off, and in fact, I'm very pleased with what you were saying. Yeah, I'm a migrant worker too, but and Sita said also she didn't know why the low-skilled, low-income workers are paying. Well, you know what interests me is that the economic theorists have been basically arguing the question of as if mixed laws of supply and demand that enable skilled higher income workers are in low supply but high demand, whereas the low skilled workers are in high supply and low demand, and that is why workers pay. You know, this is the logic that you can see written over and over again, but which I just cannot accept. If that is the market, we need to moralize the market, and we need to reform the market in order to bring about fair and ethical recruitment. There are companies who have instituted ethical recruitment and who pay all of the recruitment fees and costs, rather. I don't like the term fees. Anyway, it's another issue about the language. And they have shown that it is profitable and it is manageable, both with regard to agencies and employers, that the employer pays the recruitment costs. I think Amit is correct. We have to sit down and work out very clearly and honestly who is going to pay for what. We have the list of all of the costs of recruitment. Then we should work out, based upon some kind of moral assumptions or some kind of rationale for who pays for what and what is reasonable. I've done that to some extent in the past, but I don't want to raise it all here now. But that is really quite crucial. But along with that, it has to be acknowledged that the so-called extra payments that are used for the bribery and kickbacks have to be acknowledged and have to be eliminated. Now, that is going to be difficult, more difficult than you may think, because it is a big business. I can show you, I didn't have time, but I have documents showing how much a human resource manager has been creaming off with these kickback payments by recruitment agencies. He was being just from one recruitment agent, he was earning $500,000 per year. And that's just in the kickbacks. Now, that's just, the tip of the iceberg. We are talking about a multi-billion-dollar business just in the payments for the supply contracts. Not to mention what Sita mentioned also, what agents have to pay when the employing company personnel come to the country for skills testing, and it's a lot more sorted than Sita made out to be. And these things happen. Who pays for that? It is the low-skilled, low-income workers. So these are practices that have to be faced. They have to be. You have to be honest and stop with the euphemisms of hidden costs and sunk costs and it's just the way of doing business and so on. These are things that really need to be challenged because they become the norm. And once it becomes the norm, people accept these things. People, even economists accept that this bribery and corruption exists because they see that is the way business is done. Well, I personally just don't accept that because it is the low-skilled, low-income, the poorest workers who are actually paying, right? Anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, all the four speakers. And I think before I hand over to Mr. Gupta, I can see him right now. Before I hand over to him, I just want to say, one word. Basically that, we all talk about recruitment agents. But I was doing some study in Kerala. Kerala has currently 25 lakhs migrants outside India. Out of that, only 1 lakh has been sent by the 2 government agencies. That means the remaining were sent by, half of them sent by friends and relatives. And, where are they going to figure out? And of course, there are good agencies, there are bad agencies. I think we should look at it, we should locate it, we should see that as I go back, probably that what we talk about, no workers should pay, but how do you articulate that? I'm going to stop here. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Gupta for the final remarks and the vote of thanks. Thank you for everyone. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, Shri Abbagini Ramu, Joint Secretary of IA1, our esteemed panelists and moderator, Mr. Rajan, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. On behalf of MEA and the India Center for Migration, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers for presenting their work and analysis on this crucial issue today. Sincere thanks to Professor Rajan, for our moderator, for efficiently coordinating this discourse. Special thanks to Shri Abbagini Ramu for delivering today's opening remarks. Our sincere thanks to all our invitees for their crucial insights and interventions on the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, there have been significant challenges in recruitment costs as highlighted today. At the same time, the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic and the resultant negative impact on labor markets across the globe is likely to considerably increase the resultant recruitment costs unless regulated. It therefore becomes essential to address those challenges by modifying policies and practices and by simultaneously educating migrants about their rights. I agree with Professor Rajan that till now, many factors about many deals about the recruitment costs are still a secret, as it used to be 22 years. I also taken note of the points raised by Shri Amit Saxena. Maybe it might help if RAs are required to declare the fees charged by them, its details for various countries on e-migration portal or their own portals. Deliberations have been fruitful and contributing towards an understanding around realities of labor recruitment, which should further lead to advancing policies on fair and safe migration. Thanks to you all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we close, it's our practice that we take a group photograph virtually. So may I request everyone to turn on their cameras, please, and so that we can take a virtual snap.